At 22, she was just a naive intern in a luxury resort, until she fell into the arms of her father's friend, the owner of the resort, the billionaire everyone desired. And this forbidden love would take them to places they never imagined. Leah Parker thought she was starting a summer job at Sanctuary, the most luxurious resort in the Caribbean. She had been there less than half an hour when it happened, her first mistake. She saw him, a man rising from the turquoise sea like he owned it. Muscular, bronzed, droplets sliding down every line of his chest. Leah froze behind a palm tree, her heart pounding. She should have been finding the main office. Not gawking like a lovesick teenager, then a deep voice, like a whisper, cut through the air right behind her. "See something you like?" Leah spun around and nearly tripped over her own shoes. And there he was. Grey eyes, sharp jaw, water dripping from his hair. Lethal up close. I wasn't staring. His smile was pure sin. "Really? Because it looked like you were." She opened her mouth to argue, but then he glanced down, noticed her ID badge, and froze. "Leah Parker!" His voice sharpened. "Ricardo's daughter." Her stomach dropped. Oh God, she thought, could it be him? The man I'm not supposed to even look at. He offered his wet hand, introduced himself like it was nothing. Daniel Reeves, and the world tilted. The billionaire, her father's partner, the owner of the resort. The man she had spent 5 solid minutes practically undressing with her eyes. Daniel's gaze swept over her. "Last time I saw you, you were 12. Braces, knobby knees." The way he looked at her made her chest tighten. She bit her lip, thinking, why does that sound so dangerous? Why do I feel like I can't breathe? She managed to whisper, "I remember you." His smile deepened. "Do you? Because the woman standing here looks nothing like that little girl." Hours later, Leah walked into his office, forcing herself to be professional. The view of the ocean stretched behind him, but all she saw was him. A photograph on his desk caught her eye, a beautiful woman smiling. "Your wife?" she asked softly. Daniel's expression darkened. "My late wife. I've lost her 3 years ago." Her heart clenched, and she inhaled sharply, realizing he isn't just danger. He's broken, and suddenly she wanted to know everything about him. They spoke about the resort, but every word carried a current. She gave a suggestion about ecotourism. His eyes lit with admiration. "You're impressive," he said. "And then you start tomorrow, 8 sharp. But tonight, dinner, private guests dining. Room, elegant, something that shows how much you've grown up." Her breath caught. Dinner with the stunning man who had unsettled her from the very first. Glance, her father's old friend and now her boss. She told herself it was only business, but the thought of sitting across from him made her pulse race in ways it shouldn't. At exactly 7 p.m., Leah stood outside the private dining room, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the midnight blue dress she'd packed for special occasions. "This is just dinner," she told herself. "Professional dinner, with Dad's best friend who happens to look like he stepped out of a magazine." The door opened before she could knock, and Daniel filled the doorway in a charcoal suit, his expression carefully professional, right on time. "Please come in." The dining room was elegant but not intimate, ocean view, soft lighting, but the table maintained proper distance between their chairs. Daniel moved to pull out her chair with practiced courtesy, and she caught the subtle scent of his cologne as he stepped close. "And the chef prepared something special tonight. I hope you don't mind seafood." "That sounds wonderful." "Thank you." As they settled into dinner conversation, Leah found herself studying his face when he wasn't looking, the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the silver threading through his dark hair at his temples. "Your father tells me you graduated summa cum laude. Northwestern's program is impressive." "I worked hard for it." She took a sip of wine, feeling it warm her cheeks. "Though I have to admit, this feels surreal. Having dinner with someone from Dad's stories." Something flickered across Daniel's features. Stories. The legendary Daniel Reeves. Dad's talked about you for years. The brilliant businessman, the perfect husband." She trailed off, remembering the photograph on his desk. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your father has always been generous with his praise." He said you built this place for your wife. The silence stretched a beat too long. Daniel's fingers tightened around his wine glass. Elena had very specific ideas about what a resort should feel like. Sanctuary was her vision. There was something careful in the way he said his wife's name, like he was handling fragile glass. 3 years, and he still looks like it hurts to talk about her, she realized. She had wonderful taste, Laya said softly. Daniel's eyes met hers across the table, and for a moment she saw something unguarded there. Grief, yes, but also something else that made her breath catch. Yes, he said quietly. She did. The moment hung between them, charged with something neither acknowledged. Then Daniel looked away, back to safer ground. Tell me about your ideas for the resort. Your father mentioned you had some thoughts on marketing strategy. But as they talked business, Laya couldn't shake the feeling that something important had passed between them in that brief, unguarded moment, and that Daniel was working very hard to pretend it hadn't happened at all. The next morning, Laya woke with Daniel's voice echoing in her mind, and the taste of expensive wine still lingering on her lips. She'd barely slept, replaying every moment of their dinner, the way his fingers had brushed hers when he'd handed her the wine, the careful distance he'd maintained, the flash of something unguarded in his eyes when he'd spoken about Elena. Professional boundaries. She reminded herself as she dressed for her first official day of work. He's Dad's best friend. He's my boss. He's 20 years older. But as she walked through the resort's marble lobby toward the marketing department, she couldn't shake the memory of that moment when their eyes had met across the dinner table. You must be the famous Laya Parker. A woman with perfectly styled auburn hair and a razor-sharp smile extended her hand. Christy Westbrook, Human Resources. Nice to meet you. Christy's handshake lingered a moment too long, her eyes assessing. I knew your boss quite well. Back in the day. Something in her tone made Laya's stomach tighten. The way Christy said "knew" carried implications that had nothing to do with business. Daniel and I go way back, Christy continued, her smile never wavering. Before Elena, of course. Ancient history now, before Elena. The words hit like ice water, and Laya felt something twist uncomfortably in her chest that she had no right to feel. Well, I should get to work, Laya managed. Of course. Though a word of advice? Christy stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost motherly. Daniel's been through hell. The last thing he needs is complications. The warning was clear, even wrapped in concern. Stay away. Don't make this messy. As Laya settled at her assigned desk, she tried to focus on the marketing materials spread before her, but her mind kept drifting to Christy's words. Ancient history. How long had they been together? How serious had it been? Morning meeting in 5. Daniel's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. She looked up to find him standing by her cubicle, all business in a navy suit, his expression carefully neutral. Of course, Mr. Reeves. Something flickered in his eyes at the formal address, but he simply nodded and walked away. In the conference room, Laya took notes while Daniel discussed quarterly projections, trying to ignore the way her pulse spiked every time his gaze accidentally found hers. He was being deliberately professional, no lingering looks, no casual touches, no trace of the man who'd almost smiled at her over dinner. It should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a door slamming shut on something that had barely begun to open. After the meeting, as others filed out, Daniel's voice stopped her at the door. Miss Parker. A word. Her heart hammered as the last person left and they were alone. Last night, he said quietly, not quite meeting her eyes. I want to make sure we understand each other. Here it comes, she thought. The speech about boundaries and professionalism and forgetting whatever had passed between them. What we discussed about Elena, about the resort. I'd prefer if that stayed between us. That was it. Not a rejection. Not a warning about staying professional. Just a request for discretion about his grief. Of course, she said softly. Daniel's shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you. And Laya. The sound of her first name on his lips made her breath catch. Welcome to Sanctuary. As he left her standing there in the empty conference room, Laya realized that Daniel Reeves was even more dangerous than she'd thought, because he was trying so hard to be good. 2 weeks had passed since that first dinner, and Laya was discovering that working for Daniel Reeves was its own special kind of torture, not because he was demanding, quite the opposite. He treated her with the same careful professionalism he showed every employee, which somehow felt worse than if he'd been difficult. She'd catch him looking at her during meetings, but the moment their eyes met, he'd glance away like she'd burned him. "The ecotourism proposal needs revision," he said during their weekly review, sliding a folder across his desk without quite letting their fingers touch. "Too ambitious for someone with your limited experience." There it was. The age thing wrapped in professional courtesy. "He's treating me like a child again," she realized, frustration flaring hot in her chest. Limited experience? She kept her voice level despite the sting. "I researched comparable properties across 3 continents. The data supports every recommendation." Daniel's jaw tightened slightly. "Data doesn't account for practical implementation. You don't have the field experience yet. Numbers on paper don't always match reality." The dismissal hit exactly where it hurt most. "So because I'm young, my ideas don't matter?" "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." She stood, placing her hands flat on his desk and leaning forward. "This is the second time you've dismissed my work because of my age. Yesterday it was the marketing timeline, today it's ecotourism. You've been treating me like I'm still 12 years old since the moment I walked in here." Daniel went very still, his eyes flickering to where her blouse gaped slightly at the neckline before snapping back to her face. "Sit down, Miss Parker." The formal address, after 2 weeks of careful Laya, felt like a slap. But she caught something in his voice, strain, like he was fighting himself. "Why?" she challenged. "Because you said so? Because you're the adult and I'm just the naive intern?" Daniel's control cracked just slightly. "Because if you don't sit down, I'm going to do something we'll both regret." The admission hung between them like a lit fuse. Laya's pulse hammered against her throat as she realized what he meant. "He wants me," she thought, with a thrill of power and terror. All this professional distance, all this "you're too young" bullshit. And he wants me anyway. Instead of sitting, she moved around his desk, watching his pupils dilate as she approached. "Laya," her name was a warning. "What exactly would we regret, Daniel?" He stood abruptly, towering over her, close enough that she could see the pulse jumping in his throat. "You don't know what you're playing with." "Stop saying that." Her voice grew fierce. "Stop acting like I'm some teenager with a crush. I'm a grown woman who knows exactly what she wants. You're a child." The word shattered something inside her. She reached up and grabbed his tie, pulling him down until their faces were inches apart. "Do I feel like a child to you?" Daniel's breath came harsh against her lips, his hands hovering just above her waist like he was afraid to touch her. For a moment, the 20-year gap between them disappeared entirely. There was just heat and want and the trembling edge of something that could destroy them both. Then his phone rang, sharp and insistent, and reality crashed back. Daniel stepped away like she'd electrocuted him. Answering on the 3rd ring, Reeves. His voice was rough, carefully controlled. "Ricardo?" "Yes, she's working out very well, Dad." The word hit Laya like ice water, and she stumbled backward as Daniel's conversation continued, professional and warm, with the man whose daughter he'd been about to kiss. The rest of that afternoon was torture. Laya sat at her desk, pretending to work while Daniel's voice drifted through his office door as he laughed with her father on the phone. Casual, warm, friendly, everything he wasn't with her anymore. When 5 o'clock finally came, she escaped to the resort's beach bar, desperate for air and space to think. That's where Christy found her, 20 minutes later, sliding into the bar stool beside her with predatory grace. "Rough day at the office?" Christy's smile was all teeth. "You look a little flustered." Laya gripped her mojito tighter. "Just adjusting to the workload, of course." Though I couldn't help but notice Daniel seemed tense during the board call. "Very tense," Christy signaled the bartender for wine. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The fishing expedition was painfully obvious, but Laia felt heat flood her cheeks anyway. Daniel and I have a strictly professional relationship. Christie's laugh was like broken glass. I said the same thing once. Before I learned that Daniel Reeves doesn't do strictly professional with beautiful young women. The words hit like acid. Before Eleanor, Christie had said. How many others had there been? He was different then, of course, younger, less damaged. Christie swirled her wine thoughtfully. Though I have to say, watching him struggle with his conscience over you has been fascinating. Struggle with his conscience. So Christie had noticed too. I don't know what you mean, Laia lied. Oh, sweetheart. Christie's voice turned mockingly maternal. The way he looks at you. The way his jaw clenches when other men talk to you. The way he's been avoiding you for 2 weeks. Each observation landed like a physical blow because they were all true. Daniel's a good man, Christie continued. But he's also human, and you're very young and very pretty and very eager to please. She leaned closer. It's not your fault he's tempted, but it would be your fault if you acted on it. Excuse me. You're 22, honey? He's 42. Your father's best friend. Your boss. Christie's voice hardened. If something happens between you two, who do you think gets hurt? Who do you think gets blamed? The question twisted in Laia's stomach because she knew the answer. Her. She'd be the home-wrecker, the gold digger, the naive intern who seduced her father's grieving friend. Daniel's been through enough, Christie said softly. Elena's death nearly destroyed him. The last thing he needs is a scandal with someone young enough to be his daughter. Young enough to be his daughter. The words echoed the cruel mathematics she'd been trying to ignore. When Daniel was 22, her age now, she'd been 2 years old. When he was graduating college, she was learning to walk. I can see you're a smart girl, Christie continued, apparently satisfied with Laia's stricken expression. Smart enough to understand that some things are just inappropriate. After Christie left, Laia sat alone at the bar, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of regret. Maybe Christie was right. Maybe the 20-year gap wasn't just a number. Maybe it was an unbridgeable chasm of experience and propriety. Maybe she was just a foolish girl with a crush on an older man who was being kind to his friend's daughter. But even as the doubts crept in, she couldn't forget the look in Daniel's eyes that afternoon. Hungry, desperate, and very far from paternal. Her phone buzzed with a text. Daniel's name made her pulse spike despite everything. Need to discuss tomorrow's client presentation. My office, 7 a.m., professional, distant, safe, but Laia knew that tomorrow morning they'd be alone in his office again, and all of Christie's warnings wouldn't be able to change the electricity that crackled between them whenever they were in the same room. Some things, she was learning, were stronger than good sense. 7 a.m. came too quickly, and Laia found herself standing outside Daniel's office with sweaty palms and Christie's warnings echoing in her head. Young enough to be his daughter. The phrase had haunted her dreams, along with mental images of whispered gossip and her father's disappointed face. She knocked softly, and Daniel's voice called for her to enter. He was already at his desk, coffee in hand, looking like he hadn't slept much either. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually perfect hair showed signs of restless fingers running through it. Close the door, he said, without looking up from the presentation materials. Spread before him, the click of the door felt final, trapping them in the same space where everything had almost imploded yesterday. The Morrison Group presentation needs restructuring, Daniel said, his voice carefully professional. Their expectations don't align with our current proposal. Laia moved to the chair across from his desk, hyper-aware of maintaining distance. Christie's voice whispered in her head, inappropriate scandal, smart enough to understand. What kind of restructuring? She asked, proud of how steady she sounded. Daniel finally looked up, and she caught her breath at the exhaustion in his grey eyes. This was a man at war with himself. More conservative approach. Less innovation. His mouth twisted slightly. Something more. Age-appropriate for the account manager. The barb hit exactly where he'd intended, age-appropriate, like she was a child being given coloring books instead of real work. Of course, she said quietly. Wouldn't want to seem too ambitious. Something flickered across Daniel's features, regret maybe, or frustration. Liar, it's fine. She stood, moving toward the window to put distance between them. I understand my place here. Do you? His voice was rougher now, strained. Because yesterday you seemed determined to forget it. Yesterday was a mistake, she said, the lie burning her throat. The memory of their confrontation hung between them, her leaning over his desk, his warning about doing something they'd both regret. The tension that had crackled in the air before Ricardo's call interrupted. And I shouldn't have gotten so close to you, she said, the admission burning her throat. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When she finally turned to face him, he was studying her with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. Was it? He stood slowly, and despite herself, Laya found herself tracking the movement of his body. Because it didn't feel like a mistake. Christie's warnings crumbled like paper in rain. The careful distance she'd maintained since entering the office seemed suddenly ridiculous when Daniel was looking at her like, "That Daniel!" Her voice came out breathier than intended. "You'll drive me insane," he said, stepping around his desk. "Do you know that? 22 years old and you make me feel like I'm losing my mind." There it was again, her age, but not as dismissal this time. As tortured confession. "I lie awake at night thinking about you," he continued, moving closer. "About how wrong this is. About how your father would never forgive me. About how I should transfer you to another department. But," she whispered, "but I can't." He stopped just out of reach, his hands clenched at his sides. "I can't stop wanting you, and I can't push you away, and I'm going straight to hell for both." The raw honesty in his voice shattered every reservation Christie had planted. This wasn't some older man manipulating a naive girl. This was a man genuinely torn apart by wanting something he thought he shouldn't have. "Then don't push me away," Laya said. Taking the final step between them, Daniel's control snapped. His hands came up to frame her face, and when his mouth crashed down on hers, it was hungry and desperate and full of weeks of suppressed longing. She tasted coffee and need on his lips, felt the tremor in his hands as they tangled in her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "This was never supposed to happen," he whispered. "Probably," Laya agreed, her hands still fisted in his shirt. "But I don't care about appropriate anymore." The kiss changed everything and nothing at the same time. For the rest of that morning, Daniel maintained perfect professional distance during the Morrison Group presentation. But Laya could feel his eyes on her like a physical touch. When she suggested modifications to the marketing timeline, his gaze lingered on her mouth. When she handed him the revised projections, his fingers brushed hers deliberately. The client meeting went perfectly, but all Laya could think about was the taste of coffee and desperation she'd found on Daniel's lips. "Excellent work." "Miss Parker," Daniel said as the Morrison executives left. His voice carefully neutral for the benefit of the other staff members still in the conference room. But when everyone else filed out, he caught her wrist gently. "Stay." The single word sent heat spiraling through her stomach. When they were alone, Daniel's professional mask slipped entirely. "We need to talk about what happened," he said, but his eyes were already darkening as he looked at her. "Do we?" Laya stepped closer, emboldened by the hunger she saw in his face. "Or do we need to do it again?" Daniel's breath caught. "Laya, we can't." She silenced him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his, softer this time, more deliberate. This wasn't desperation. This was choice. Daniel groaned against her mouth, his hands coming up to tangle in her hair, and for a moment the 20-year gap between them disappeared entirely. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway, and they sprang apart just as Christie appeared in the doorway. "Oh." Christie's smile was sharp as glass. "Am I interrupting something?" "Just reviewing the client feedback," Daniel said smoothly. But Laya caught the slight tension in his voice. Christie's gaze flicked between them, taking in Laya's flushed cheeks and Daniel's slightly rumpled shirt. "Of course." "Well, Daniel, when you're finished reviewing, I have the quarterly reports you requested. The emphasis on reviewing made Lia's skin crawl. Christie knew exactly what she'd almost walked in on. After Christie left, the spell was broken. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking older than his 42 years. "This is madness," he muttered. "If she'd walked in 30 seconds earlier—" "But she didn't," Lia pointed out. This time, Daniel's grey eyes found hers, conflicted and hungry in equal measure. "Lia, what we're doing, it's not just inappropriate. It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "Your reputation. My friendship with your father. The resort." He stepped closer despite his words. "If anyone finds out that I'm involved with my best friend's 22-year-old daughter—" The way he said "involved" made her pulse spike. They were involved now. Not just attracted, not just tempted, involved. "So we'll be careful," she said. Daniel's laugh was harsh. "Careful? I just kissed you in a conference room where anyone could have walked in. That's not careful, that's reckless." "Then be reckless," Lia whispered, moving close enough to see the gold flecks in his grey eyes. "Be reckless with me." For a moment she thought he might kiss her again. The tension between them was electric, dangerous, impossible to ignore. Daniel's breath came harsh, his control stretched thin. For one terrifying, exhilarating second, Lia thought he would give in right there, in the middle of the conference room. But then he tore his gaze away, his jaw tight. "Not here, not now." "I can't," his voice cracked. "We've already crossed too many lines," Lia's heart thundered. "So you don't want me?" The muscle in his jaw ticked. "Wanting you is the problem." He stepped back, forcing distance, his professional mask slamming back into place. "Go, Lia, please." Daniel's refusal still burned in her chest like a brand. He had told her to go home, to forget, but the crack in his voice had betrayed him, and Lia couldn't let it go. That evening, Christie cornered her in the lobby with her sharp smile and syrupy tone. "Rough first week. Don't let Reeves intimidate you. He's brilliant, yes, but also complicated." Lia forced a polite smile, her skin crawling at the way Christie said his name. Complicated. As if she knew things Lia had no right to wonder about. By the time Lia escaped back to her small staff quarters, her nerves were frayed. She poured herself a glass of wine, hoping it would quiet the storm. It didn't, it only sharpened it. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, restless. "I can't keep pretending." Her heart pounded as she slipped out into the humid Caribbean night, across the moonlit path to Daniel's villa. He opened the door barefoot, sleeves rolled up, surprise flashing across his face. "Lia," his voice was rough. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, but her eyes didn't waver. "I can't fight this anymore. From the moment I saw you on that beach, I haven't been able to breathe without you." Daniel's jaw clenched. His hand braced against the doorframe, like he was holding himself up. "You don't know what you're saying." This is a line we can't uncross," her pulse thundered. "Then stop pretending you don't feel it too." She stepped closer, and before he could argue again, she rose on her toes and kissed him. For one suspended heartbeat, he didn't move. Then something inside him broke, and he crushed her against him, his mouth fierce, desperate. He pulled her inside, slamming the door shut behind them, then tore himself away, his breath ragged. "Lia," he whispered, voice shaking. "If I touch you tonight, there's no going back." Her answer came without hesitation. "I don't want to go back." His control cracked. He cupped her face, kissed her again, slower this time, reverent, trembling. His hands slid to hers, and he felt it then, the faint tremor of nerves. He froze. "Lia, is this your first—" "Yes." Her cheeks burned. "But I don't want anyone else. Just you." For a long, aching moment, he stared at her as if weighing every sin against every desire. Then his forehead dropped to hers, his voice raw. "Then I'll make sure this is something you never regret." What followed was a blur of heat and tenderness, Daniel guiding her gently, carefully, whispering her name like a vow. Every touch felt like discovery, every kiss a surrender neither of them could undo. For Lia, the fear dissolved in the safety of his arms, replaced by a rush so overwhelming it left her trembling. Undone, when it was over, she lay against his chest, the steady thud of his heart beneath her ear. Knowing her life had split into before and after, Daniel stroked her hair, his voice hoarse. "You have no idea how much trouble we're in now." Laya lifted her head, her lips curving faintly. "Then let's be in trouble together." He kissed her forehead, holding her as if he could freeze time. But dawn always comes. The next morning, Daniel's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He reached for it, and color drained from his face. "It's your father," he said quietly. "He's flying in tomorrow. A surprise visit." The words hit Laya like ice water, the warmth of their first night together turning instantly into the most dangerous secret of her life. Morning came bright and glossy, the kind of Caribbean light that made every surface look lacquered. From behind the reception desk, Laya watched a black sedan glide up the palm-lined drive. The driver hurried to open the rear door, and her father stepped out like a controlled gust of wind. Crisp suit, sun-browned face, the easy charisma of a man who could charm a room and audit it in the same breath. Daniel was already waiting on the marble steps. Their handshake collapsed into a brief embrace, practiced and familiar. 2 decades of friendship compressed into a few seconds. "Island looks good on you," Ricardo said, clapping Daniel's shoulder. "Numbers look better," Daniel replied, measured, professional. "Welcome to Sanctuary." Ricardo's gaze swept the lobby and snagged on her like a hook. "There she is." He crossed the floor in long strides and folded Laya into a bear hug that smelled like cedar and airplane air. "Look at you, polished, confident." "I'm trying," she said, and made herself smile. "Daniel's been taking good care of you, I hope." Her father asked, casual tone, not so casual eyes, flicking past her toward the steps. Heat flared at the back of her neck. "Very good care. He's been attentive." She heard Daniel's quiet inhale behind her and didn't risk turning around. "Good." Ricardo checked his watch, back to business. "Tour me, then ops at 3, HR after. I want real-time visibility on the eco-expansion and staffing. Heard a few rumblings from the board I'd like to put to bed." The word rumblings sounded light. The look he sent Daniel was not. They started on the top floor, where the horizon cut a hard blue line across the windows. Laya moved him through guest services, conference suites, and the boutique suites Elena had once designed on a napkin. She heard herself describing occupancy patterns, conversion funnels, brand sentiment. It all came out clean and steady. The way she'd practiced alone at night when the AC rattled and she couldn't sleep. In housekeeping, she shook hands with the afternoon shift lead and asked about turnover between back-to-backs. On the loading dock, she pointed out the new supplier labels and the barcode system Ops had rolled out last quarter. In the spa corridor, a guest stopped them to gush about a couple's package. Laya handled it with a smile and a note to follow up with marketing. Ricardo said nothing, but she felt his eyes on her, assessing, proud, wary. They paused on an outdoor terrace where the sea threw shards of light at the glass rail. "And Daniel?" he asked, seemingly offhand. "Good mentor?" The word lodged under her ribs like a splinter. Mentor didn't account for tremors in conference rooms, or the way a voice could feel like gravity. She kept her voice even. "He's taught me a lot, quickly." Ricardo nodded, lips twitching. "When you were 8, you told anyone who would listen you were going to marry him someday. Trailed him around the house like a puppy." He laughed, gentle with the memory. "He brought you a model sailboat, remember?" Lightning strobed through her, sunny kitchens, polished shoes, the ache of hero worship that once fit like a hand-me-down sweater. "Kids say things," she said, and was glad the wind stole some of the thinness from her voice. "They do." He leaned his elbows on the rail, eyes narrowing toward the conference wing. "Still, the way you two work, there's an ease, useful, as long as it stays useful." The warning was wrapped in warmth. It still landed like a lead coin. They cut through the gardens on the way back, jasmine and salt, and the distant thump of pool music. Through the conference glass, Laya caught a glimpse of Daniel in a navy suit, an iPad in his hand, his face all clean lines and restraint. Her pulse did that traitorous leap, then plunged when he didn't look up. Back in the lobby, Ricardo checked his messages. "Ops moved to 3 sharp, HR at 4. I want open books and clear answers. We all sleep better when the facts line up." Understood, she said. A shadow slipped across the marble. Christie materialized at the edge of their path, immaculate as ever, a folder tucked to her ribs like a violin. "Mr. Parker," she said, with the kind of smile that could slice fruit. "Welcome back. If you need anything from HR, I'm at your disposal." "Appreciate it," Ricardo replied. "We'll see you at 4. Christie's gaze flicked to Laya, one surgical pass, cool and assessing, then slid past her to where Daniel had just stepped into view. For a beat, something like triumph flared in her eyes and vanished. "Transparency is everyone's friend," she said lightly, and moved on. Laya's mouth went dry. She watched Christie's reflection smear and disappear in the polished floor, and suddenly wished the AC would roar louder. "Breathe," Ricardo said, surprising her. "First weeks are always heavy. It gets easier when you know where everything's buried." "Is anything buried?" she asked before she could catch herself. Ricardo's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's what meetings are for." He headed toward the elevators, already composing his next set of questions. Laya hesitated, fingers worrying the edge of her badge. Across the lobby, Daniel met her eyes for a fraction of a second, one heartbeat of recognition, of promise, of hold steady, and then the moment was gone. Professionalism sliding back over him like a pane of glass. 3 o'clock would bring charts and vendors and timelines. 4 o'clock would bring HR. Between now and then, she had exactly one job: do the work, keep her voice level, and pray that whatever Christie thought she had in that folder was more smoke than fire. The elevator chimed. Somewhere outside, a gull screamed. Laya squared her shoulders and followed her father in, the doors sealing on the scent of salt and nerves, and the feeling that a storm was rolling in over calm water. The conference room was tense long before the knock came. Laya sat beside her father, still stunned by what she'd just discovered. She had believed this internship was only a summer favor, arranged by Ricardo through his best friend Daniel. But today the truth surfaced. Her father had quietly signed papers only days ago. He wasn't just visiting, he was now a partner in Sanctuary, which meant she wasn't only an intern anymore. She was tied to the ownership of this place in ways she never imagined. Daniel clicked to the next slide of his report. Occupancy peaked at 92% last weekend. The eco-expansion is on schedule, with regional suppliers reducing costs. Ricardo leaned back, pleased. "Impressive numbers, Daniel. And having Laya here, well, it's working out even better than I hoped." Heat crept into her cheeks. Daniel's eyes flicked to hers briefly, then back to Ricardo. "She's been invaluable. In fact," Ricardo continued, "I could see this becoming more permanent. My daughter stepping into the business longer term." Laya's stomach lurched. Permanent meant working here indefinitely under Daniel's watch, pretending professionalism when every look between them felt like a live wire. Before she could respond, the door swung open. Christie Westbrook stepped inside, a folder clutched tight, her smile sharp as broken glass. "Sorry to interrupt, but this can't wait," she said smoothly. "It concerns inappropriate workplace behavior." The words landed like shrapnel. Daniel stiffened. "Christie, this isn't the time." "I'm afraid it is." She turned her gaze deliberately on Laya. "It involves Miss Parker directly." Laya's pulse spiked. Her father's brow furrowed. "Concerns my daughter how?" Christie folded her arms with practiced calm. "There are reports of a romantic involvement between a senior executive and a junior employee. Such conduct violates Sanctuary's policies and requires immediate action." The room froze. Laya's throat closed. Daniel's jaw locked. Ricardo didn't react with outrage. Not yet. Instead, his tone was dangerously even. "Christie, perhaps you've forgotten something. This resort isn't Daniel's alone anymore." Her smile faltered. "I'm a partner now," Ricardo continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades in boardrooms. "Which means when you accuse my daughter, you're not just addressing an intern. You're speaking to 2 of your employers." Christie's color drained. Of course, Mr. Parker, I didn't mean..." Ricardo leaned forward, steel in his voice. "Before you dared to bring this to me, did it occur to you that threatening my daughter's reputation might cost you your position entirely? That you were risking your own future here?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Laya sat frozen, her father's words ringing in her ears. She wasn't powerless. Not anymore. She carried her father's name, his investment, his authority. And that made whatever secret burned between her and Daniel far more dangerous. The silence after Christie's accusation was deafening. Ricardo's face shifted through disbelief, then fury, his eyes locking on Daniel like he was seeing a stranger. An inappropriate relationship, he repeated slowly, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Between my daughter and my business partner? Christie's lips curved, savoring the drama. Multiple staff have noticed. Moments, intimacy? I thought you deserved to know before it spread further. Daniel rose to his feet, tension rolling off him. Ricardo, let's discuss this privately. No. Ricardo's voice cracked like a whip. You will answer me here now. Laya's pulse hammered as her father turned to her. Is it true? Dad, she started, but the anguish in his eyes made the words stick in her throat. Christie's smile widened. You see, she can't even deny it. Ricardo's jaw tightened. His voice dropped to a deadly calm. Get out, Christie, she blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. Out. You've already said too much in a room that doesn't concern you anymore. For a heartbeat, Christie faltered. Then she realized what he meant. Her eyes darted between Ricardo and Laya, shock flooding her face. She hadn't known Laya's father was now a co-owner. She'd accused the partner's daughter in front of him. Ricardo's gaze was steel. Did you really think you could come into my company and threaten my daughter's reputation without consequence? You answer to me as much as you do to Daniel. Christie's color drained. She gathered her folder, muttered something about acting in the company's interest, and fled the room. The door closed, leaving only the three of them. Ricardo rounded on Daniel, betrayal radiating from every line of his face. 20 years of friendship, he said hoarsely. And this is how you repay me. With my daughter? Daniel's voice was low, steady. Ricardo, listen. No! Ricardo slammed his hand on the table. You should have known better. You, of all people, knew she was off limits. Laya stepped forward, her voice trembling. Stop blaming only him. I made choices too. Her father turned to her, his expression breaking. You're 22, Laya. Do you even understand what you've risked? Your reputation, his business, my trust? Tears burned her eyes, but her voice was steady. I understand exactly what I feel, Daniel cut in, his grey eyes locked on Ricardo's. If you want to blame someone, blame me. I never intended for this to happen, but it did. And I will not stand here and let you treat your daughter like she's powerless in this. The room was a storm. Betrayal, love, fury colliding all at once. Ricardo shook his head, his voice cracking. You've destroyed everything. Laya reached for him, but he stepped back. Both of you. The words still hung in the air, sharp as broken glass. Laya couldn't breathe. Her father's gaze burned into her, filled with a betrayal she'd never seen before. Daniel stood rigid, shoulders tense as if bracing for a blow. Dad, Laya finally managed, but her voice cracked under the weight of silence. Ricardo turned to her, his tone low and devastating. I trusted you. Both of you. And this is how you repay me. Laya's throat tightened. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And I won't stand here and pretend it means nothing. Means nothing. Ricardo's voice rose, edged with fury. You're my daughter. He's my partner. Do you have any idea what you've risked? Daniel stepped forward, voice steady though his hands trembled. If you want someone to blame, blame me. I should have walked away the moment I realized what I felt. But I didn't. That's on me. Ricardo's eyes snapped to him. Damn right it's on you. You were supposed to protect her, not... He stopped himself, the words choking in his throat. Laya cut in, stronger now. Stop acting like I was some clueless child. I made my choice too. You can hate it, but don't erase me from my own story. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ricardo's jaw tightened as he looked between them. 20 years of friendship warring with 22 years of fatherhood. Finally, he exhaled slowly, the sound heavy with loss. This ends now. Whatever you think you have, it's over. Laya, you're coming home with me. Tonight. Her chest hollowed. She glanced at Daniel, whose face revealed nothing but quiet devastation. And in that moment, Laya realized that her father wasn't just angry. He was ready to tear her entire world apart. 2 weeks later, Laya was back in Miami, lying on her childhood bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning lazily above her. Everything felt smaller here. Her room, her life, herself. She had walked away from the Caribbean paradise, from her internship, from Daniel. Or maybe she hadn't walked. Maybe she'd been dragged by her father's ultimatum. Either way, the silence that followed was unbearable. Her phone lay untouched on the nightstand. No calls, no messages. Daniel had kept his word, distance. That somehow hurt more than her father's rage. A soft knock came at the door. Her mother, Jennifer, entered with a plate of warm empanadas. "Sweetheart, you need to eat." "I'm not hungry," Laya whispered. Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed, eyes soft but steady. "Your father is worried about you." "We both are." Laya turned toward her. "He told you?" "Enough," Jennifer said gently. "About Daniel, about the fight." Laya braced herself for judgment, but Jennifer surprised her. "You're 22, Laya, and you fell in love with someone your father thinks is wrong for you. That doesn't make your feelings disappear." Her throat tightened. "So you think it's wrong too?" Jennifer was quiet for a moment. Then softly, "I think it's complicated. But I also remember what it felt like to be your age and to fall for a man older than me." Laya blinked. "What? Your father was 35 when we met." "I was 23, Jennifer gave a wistful smile. "People whispered. Said it would never last. But here we are." The words hit Laya like lightning. "So you understand?" Jennifer nodded. "I understand more than your father wants to admit. But what matters is whether this is real, Laya. Whether it survives time, distance, and scrutiny. That's what tells you if it's love." Tears stung her eyes. "I can't stop thinking about him." Jennifer brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Then maybe you owe it to yourself to find out if he's worth the fight." That night, long after her parents had gone to bed, Laya sat at her desk with her laptop open. The cursor blinked on an empty email, mocking her hesitation. Finally, she began to type, "I miss you," 3 words. That was all. But they carried the weight of everything she hadn't been able to say. She hit send before she could lose her nerve, and for the first time in 2 weeks, she let herself hope. Daniel Reeves stared at the email on his laptop for the 15th time that morning. 3 simple words that had turned his carefully ordered world upside down. "I miss you." The message had arrived at 2:47 a.m. Miami time, which meant Laya had been awake in the middle of the night, thinking about him the same way he'd been thinking about her for 2 weeks straight. He'd read her words a dozen times, started replies he couldn't finish, and ultimately closed the laptop without responding at all, because what could he say? That he missed her too? That every morning he expected to see her bright smile in his conference room? That the resort felt hollow without her energy filling the silence? A sharp knock interrupted his spiral. "Come in," he said curtly. Christy Westbrook entered, perfectly polished as always, a folder in her hands and that predatory smile on her lips. Daniel's jaw tightened. She was still here. After everything. Technically, Ricardo's abrupt departure had left her position untouched. No formal paperwork, no signatures. Daniel hadn't forced the issue yet, not while the partnership itself hung by a thread. But every second of her presence was a reminder of betrayal. "You look terrible, Daniel." "Rough night," she said lightly. His stare was icy. "State your business, Christy." She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Just checking how you're handling the situation." With Ricardo's daughter. The careful way she said situation made his hands clench into fists. "There is no situation. And if you were hoping to stay relevant by gossiping, you miscalculated." Her smile faltered for the first time. "I'm still the HR director." "Not for long." His voice was low, lethal. "The only reason you're still in this building is because Ricardo left before I could deal with you. Once he returns, your position is finished." Christie's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and unease, but she covered it with a scoff. "I suppose that means she's written to you already." Young girls rarely give up easily when they think they're in love. The casual cruelty in her tone made Daniel's stomach twist. He leaned across the desk, his voice sharp as glass. Liar is not a girl, she's a woman. And you do well to keep her name out of your mouth for however long you have left here. Christie hesitated, then placed the folder on his desk with exaggerated care. Quarterly numbers. Since you're still running the resort, at least for now. Daniel didn't answer. He just stared her down until she finally turned and left, heels clicking against the marble floor. When the door closed, he reopened the laptop and stared at Liar's email again. Stay away. That was the logical choice, the mature choice. The choice that protected her from scandal and spared him more humiliation. But as he looked out at the Caribbean waters, the very place he'd first seen her, where his life had quietly shifted forever, he realized he was tired of logic. Tired of playing safe. His phone buzzed with a message. Ricardo, how are things at the resort? Professional, distant. Like 20 years of friendship had been reduced to quarterly reports. Daniel typed back, fine. Numbers are good. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, we need to talk. Not about business, about us. About what happened. Daniel's chest tightened. He typed, when? Tomorrow. I'm flying back to Barbados tomorrow. 24 hours until he faced the man whose trust he'd shattered. 24 hours to decide whether to keep pretending or fight for the only thing that felt real. He looked at Liar's email one more time, then typed his reply with trembling fingers. I miss you too, more than you know. His finger hovered for a moment. Then he hit send. Some mistakes, he realized, were worth making twice. And some love stories were worth burning for, no matter who tried to snuff them out. Ricardo Parker arrived at Sanctuary looking older than his 57 years, the weight of sleepless nights carved into the lines of his face. The marble lobby shimmered in the Caribbean sun, but the warmth did nothing to soften the storm brewing between the two men about to meet. Daniel was waiting in the same conference room where their friendship had nearly shattered weeks earlier. This time, there were no staff, no distractions. Just 2 cups of untouched coffee and 20 years of history lying between them. You look like hell, Ricardo said flatly as he walked in. Feel worse, Daniel admitted. Thanks for coming back. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Finally, Ricardo leaned forward, eyes sharp. Jennifer told me about Liar, about how broken she's been without you. Daniel's throat tightened. I thought giving her space was the only way to protect her. Protect her? Ricardo's voice cut like glass. By abandoning her? By making her think she meant nothing? Daniel flinched but didn't back down. If I stayed away, it was because I thought she deserved better than me. Then answer me directly, Ricardo pressed, his tone like a judge delivering sentence. Do you love my daughter? Daniel didn't hesitate. Yes, more than I ever loved anyone, even Elena. And I know that sounds like betrayal to say out loud, but it's the truth. Ricardo inhaled sharply, the comparison hitting like a blow. But instead of rage, something else flickered across his face, recognition. When Jennifer and I first met, I was 35. She was 23. People said I was a predator. Said it would never last. Sound familiar? Daniel blinked, stunned. He hadn't expected confession, let alone empathy. You stayed together, he said quietly. Ricardo nodded. Because we fought for it. Because we didn't let the world tell us what our love was worth. The question is, are you willing to fight for Liar, or are you going to keep hiding behind excuses? Hope and fear warred inside Daniel's chest. If I fight for her, I lose you. Ricardo's gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. You already lost me the day you kissed her in secret. The only way forward is honesty. For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt like he could breathe. His best friend wasn't forgiving him, not entirely, but he was giving him a path forward. Then I'll make it right, Daniel said, his voice steady now. I'll go to Miami, I'll tell her the truth. I'll prove it's not just some reckless obsession. Ricardo studied him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Good, because she deserves a man who won't run when things get hard. And Daniel, His eyes darkened with warning. "If you break her, I swear you'll answer to me." Daniel accepted the threat like a vow. He pushed back his chair, determination settling over him like armor. For the first time since this entire mess began, he knew exactly what he had to do. Tomorrow, he'd be on the first flight to Miami. Tomorrow, he'd take Laya back. Daniel's flight landed in Miami just after sunset. The city lights stretched like fireflies against the ocean, a glowing reminder of everything he had to win back or lose forever. He didn't stop at the hotel. He didn't call ahead. He went straight to the Parker home. Heart pounding like a man about to go into battle, Jennifer opened the door. Relief flickered across her face. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Is she here?" Daniel's voice was rough, stripped of all pretense. "She's in the garden," Jennifer said softly. "By the pool. She's been there every night since she left Barbados." Daniel swallowed hard. "Thank you for not turning her against me." Jennifer's smile was sad but kind. "I remember what it felt like to love someone the world said was wrong. Don't waste this, Daniel." He nodded and stepped into the house. His pulse hammering, Laya was exactly where Jennifer had said, sitting barefoot at the edge of the pool, a white sundress flowing around her legs, her reflection trembling in the water. She didn't turn when he approached, though her shoulders stiffened. "I was starting to think you weren't coming," she whispered, her voice low but steady. Daniel's chest ached at the sound. He crouched beside her, close enough to touch, but not daring to until she let him. "I'm here now, and I'm not leaving again." Finally she turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed from too many sleepless nights, but the moment she saw him, they filled with something else, hope, fear, and the love they'd both been trying so hard to deny. "Your email," she whispered. "Did you mean it?" Daniel reached for her hand, his thumb tracing trembling circles across her palm. "Every word. I missed you so much it nearly killed me." A tear slid down her cheek, but she laughed softly through it. "That's dramatic, even for you." "Ricardo knows," Daniel said. "We talked. He didn't give me his blessing easily, but he didn't shut the door either. He said if I was going to love you, I'd better fight for you. And I swear to God, Laya, I will." Her breath caught, the weight of his words sinking in. "So what happens now?" Daniel leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers, his voice low and fierce. "Now we stop hiding. No more secrets, no more shame. If we're going to do this, we do it all the way, together." For a moment, neither of them moved. The night was quiet but charged, the air thick with everything unsaid. Then Laya's lips parted, and Daniel kissed her. Slow at first, reverent, like a vow. The taste of salt and tears and relief flooded between them, and the years, the risks, the warnings, they all fell away. There was only them. When they finally pulled apart, Laya's voice trembled, but her eyes were clear. "I don't care what people say. I don't care how complicated it is. I love you." Daniel cupped her face, his gray eyes shining with raw honesty. "And I love you. More than I've ever loved anything in my life. I'm done running. You're mine, Laya, if you'll have me." She laughed through her tears and kissed him again, harder this time, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I've always been yours." The pool water shimmered around them, Miami lights blazing overhead, as if the universe itself was giving them permission at last. The Caribbean sun poured golden light over Sanctuary Resort, the same place where everything had begun. White roses and jasmine framed a wooden arch on the beach, waves curling softly at the shore as if they too had gathered to witness the moment. Inside the bridal suite, Laya stood in front of a mirror, her ivory silk gown flowing around her like liquid moonlight. Her mother fastened the last button with trembling fingers. "You look radiant," Jennifer whispered. Laya smiled faintly, nerves sparking through her veins. "I still can't believe this is real." A knock came, and Ricardo stepped into the room. He wore a dark suit that made him look younger, stronger, but his eyes shimmered with tears he refused to let fall. "My little girl," he said softly. "Except you're not so little anymore." Laya turned, her throat tightening. "You're okay with this, truly?" Ricardo placed a small velvet box in her hand. Inside lay a delicate sapphire bracelet, her grandmother's. "Your mother wore it on our wedding day." "And yes, I'm okay with this." More than okay. You've chosen with your heart, and I can't ask for more than that. Emotions surged hot in her chest as Ricardo fastened the bracelet around her wrist. For all the battles, the tears, the nights of doubt, this was the moment it had all been leading to. The music began. Guests rose as Ricardo walked Laia down the sandy aisle, each step both heavy with history and light with hope. And then she saw him. Daniel stood beneath the arch, his navy suit cut sharp against the glowing backdrop of ocean and sky. When his eyes found hers, the world seemed to still. Every doubt, every judgment, every whispered warning disappeared in that single look. "You're beautiful," he murmured as Ricardo placed her hand in his. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, grounding her, claiming her. The ceremony was brief, but every word felt like scripture. Vows exchanged, rings slipped into place. Promises made not just to each other, but to the life they would build together. Against all odds, when the officiant finally declared them husband and wife, Daniel didn't wait. He cupped Laia's face in both hands and kissed her with the intensity of a man who had fought hell and back to reach this moment. Applause rose, but all Laia felt was him, the strength of his arms, the steadiness of his love, the fire that had never dimmed. Later, as they swayed together in their first dance, the night sky glittering with stars above them, Daniel bent his head to her ear. "No regrets?" he asked, his voice low, intimate. Laia smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "Only one," Daniel pulled back, frowning. "One? That it took us so long to stop caring what everyone else thought." He laughed softly, pressing his forehead to hers as they moved in a perfect rhythm. Around them, family and friends celebrated, but for Daniel and Laia, the world had narrowed to just this: love, fierce and unshakable, forged in fire and destined to last. And for the first time since that fateful day by the turquoise sea, Laia knew with absolute certainty she was exactly where she belonged. Thank you for staying till the end. Where in the world are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and if this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me.